Hello, this is David Oh. Thanks for joining me today, Tuesday afternoon, 2 to 3 for the next hour. We're going to be here talking to my guests, two very outstanding gentlemen. I'm going to tell you about them. The first is Dean Miller. Dean Miller is, well, he does a lot of things, and on top of sometimes teaching at Wharton and being the president and CEO of the Philadelphia Alliance for Capital and Technologies, he's got about 5 or 6 other hats that he wears in innovation technology. It all adds up to a lot of money, I think, so I'm envious. And then we have Chris Wink, who actually, I'm kind of an amateur at what he does. He's a real journalist, a co-founder of Technically Philly, Philly Tech Week, in Baltimore, and a bunch of other things. So he's a publisher, and he's going to tell us about his publications and about the projects they do and what it means for you, the listener. Let me start by thanking Weinerman Pain and Wellness for sponsoring this show, allowing my guests to talk to you and give you this level of substantive information. Weinerman Pain and Wellness, they do a great job. I've been to their facilities. I used to do work comp defense and sometimes personal injury, so I'm quite familiar with rehabilitation, and they are well resourced and very capable. So check them out, and thank you for hosting for sponsoring this show. All the advertisers, of course. Let me just remind you that if you weren't listening last week, we talked to Kelly Hodge, the interim district attorney of Philadelphia. She's serving from now until January. What a tough job she has, but she's competent, capable, energetic, and positive that she can make a difference here in Philadelphia in this period of time. And then we heard from Natalie Bermudez. She is the 2015 PHL Live Center Stage Pop Category winner. Her new music, and then she performed live. And then we heard from a wonderful couple, Jessica and Josh Kraft, Rock to the Future, what they do to ignite youth through music. Yeah, it's music, but also homework, self-esteem, aspirations, and other things. Let me just point out that we have PHL Live Center Stage going on. It's a free opportunity for people that are interested in a career in music. If you are a performer, a musician, something like that, and you want to be looked at by Grammy Award winning and music industry leaders, hey, just do a YouTube video of your performance. Go to www.phlive.org and submit your video. One of 10 musical categories. It's free. And then if you are selected, you will perform live in one of Philadelphia's top venues, and then at the award show at the Trocadero in December. If you are announced to be the winner, you'll get $1,000, free studio recording time, and a bunch of other great prizes. But most importantly, you have been seriously looked at by one of the top industry folks who can make a huge difference in your career. Let me introduce my first guest. His name is Dean Miller. And he is the president and CEO of the Alliance for Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Alliance for Capital and Technologies, PAC. I really focus on, capital, that means money, right? Money, capital, and technologies. And so PAC is a alliance, and it is something that he had a vision for, and he's been there for 7 years and 6 months. But as I said, he didn't just kind of come into that scene. He was involved in innovation companies, innovation funds, and a lot of different things that he's going to tell us about. So right now, let me welcome Dean Miller.
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Now, we first met actually in City Council over an issue of a potential or proposed tax on technology.
Indeed, and I've got to thank you, a huge thank you to you for supporting our fight against what we refer to as the tech tax. And just for the listeners' benefit, your help and effort and presence in that city council session was about a week after you were stabbed right outside your house.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. Well, listen, a small thing on my part, really big thing on your part. You've done it statewide in Pittsburgh, which is a city, of course, that is renowned for its technology. But when you came to council, you and the other folks that you brought with it, you kind of laid out in very simple and clear terms what this tech tax would do. And in that, you really kind of talked about, what tech has done for our city, for our region in particular, let alone our state. What is it that is happening that this tech tax would have dealt a serious blow to?
So at a macro level, this is all about the migration of the economy to an information economy.
Yes.
And not to eliminate other jobs, but there's going to be more and more growth in the information technology, and that is the use of technology by large enterprises, by small enterprises, by healthcare organizations, etc. And that's where we see a lot of job growth.
Yeah, let me ask you right now for my listeners, is that good news or bad news for them, or is that just the news?
That is good news.
Okay.
The good news is that we need more of those jobs in this region because globally that's the way the economy is moving. And so we want a bigger base of those jobs in this region. And that tech tax that was proposed was going to tax the efforts of companies that were developing software across the Commonwealth. Why is that a bad idea? Because it's a job killer.
Yes.
And the reason it's a job killer is because those jobs can move very easily. All it takes is a computer and an internet connection to get someone up and programming. And it's very easy for them to move to an adjoining state or to a different country that taxes less.
And so, this robust area, this area of growth, and something that our city's known for. Thanks to your efforts and others, that proposed tax on tech was avoided, right?
It was, for the time being.
For the time, but we got to stay alert.
We still don't have a budget deal. Let's keep that in mind.
That is true.
We are alert. We as an organization actually have a lobbyist in Harrisburg that's our eyes and ears.
Mm-hmm.
And so we pay very close attention to both negative legislation that negatively affects our community, as well as positive legislation that we want to get behind.
And so that brings us to your organization. Could you tell us about your organization?
Absolutely. So we're the largest nonprofit in this region that's a nonprofit business association that brings together entrepreneurs, investors, larger enterprises, universities, other supporting organizations, as well as the government, all around helping to grow and support the technology community. And so we focus across industry, from financial services to healthcare, from different size organizations, from 2 founders that are just getting started to large private enterprises, all the way up to large public companies that are big buyers and users of technology.
So what does that exactly mean? If there's folks listening right now and they're saying, well, what does that mean?
So any collection of companies typically has an advocacy group. Somebody who's advocating for them, whether it be on a governmental level or within a community or within an economy. And so we're that group for the technology community.
Okay.
I talked about what we do from a governmental perspective in
Yes.
terms of legislation, both good legislation and bad legislation. But we're constantly focused really on 3 critical things, particularly for entrepreneurs, to help them grow. And again, why is that important? Because growth in the economy is good, right?
Yes.
I think we can all agree to that. Growth in the economy is good.
Yes, good
we need
opportunities.
jobs, but we need good paying jobs.
Yes.
And the technology community in particular supports the economy with really good paying jobs. So we focus on number 1, capital. You already called that out. It's part of our name.
Yes.
We spend a lot of time thinking about how to grow the base of capital so that more entrepreneurs can access capital to both start their businesses as well as fuel their growth. The second piece are customers. And I think we can all agree that any organization needs customers.
Yes.
And so that first customer is always usually the hardest. And one of the things that we do is help to connect younger enterprises, younger technology companies with larger buyers of their products. The third thing is coaching. And coaching is something that can be very challenging to do. And what we've done as an organization is launched a team-based mentorship model. We did this about a year ago, and we did it in partnership with another closely aligned organization called Ben Franklin. And it is a team-based mentorship model that delivers anywhere from 2 to 5 experienced entrepreneurs to a less experienced entrepreneur. And so that's the element of coaching that we're focused on, which is really developing the next generation of successful Philadelphia-based entrepreneurs.
Well, that sounds very good. I mean, basically, capital, basically we need money. There has to be gas in the car to go. And new companies won't survive without customers. And then all these companies, especially the startups, or even really, very experienced companies, once they hit a new learning curve or they do something different, they need to have expert advice to develop. Now, I understand why that's great for me here as a citizen of the Philadelphia region. But why would companies help their competitors, let's say? Should we call them competitors?
No. So you're talking about the coaching program in particular?
The coaching, the putting the money in them for them, helping them with... What is it that this means for everybody?
So for whether or not you're involved in the technology community, you care about your community and the growth of your community, right? And the next generation of your community.
Right.
So it might be your 10-year-old that's taking their first introduction to technology class in school. Or it could be a young college student that's trying to figure out what to major in so that they can get that good job when they leave. All that kind of comes down to having a great base of growing jobs.
Yes.
And so that's why anybody should care about what we're doing, specifically our organization, to help grow and strengthen the entrepreneurial community around technology and healthcare.
Well, that's great. I mean, I appreciated my role as a councilman. I appreciate the fact that if we didn't have a growing tech scene with opportunities for investment, customers, and coaching, innovators would go to other areas where that is available, and then we would, as a community, lose the revenues, jobs, and opportunities that happens when we do get together.
Historically, they have,
Yes.
and less of them are leaving because of the opportunities that exist here in the greater Philadelphia area. We still lose some to Silicon Valley, to New York. Heck, we've got 100+ universities and colleges in this region, so there's a lot of young talent that comes into this region from outside the area. And naturally, some of them leave after they're finished, but less and less of them leave. And our hope is to retain as many of them as we can, and to help those that want to start businesses grow them and grow them here.
If I'm someone who, let's say, graduated from one of our universities here in Philadelphia a few years ago, and me and my buddy, we've come up with this genius idea, and so we're listening to the radio and we're saying, hey, that's right, that's what we really need. How do I connect with your organization, and how will it help me in the ways that maybe I wanted to, or maybe some ways that I haven't even thought of?
So a couple ways. We put on 30+ programs and events over the course of a year, which enable an entrepreneur to come out and connect with investors, potential customers, etc.
Okay.
So people can go onto our website,
Yes.
www.philadelphiapact.com, and check out our upcoming events. So there's a host of different types of events. So say you've got a medical technology. Well, we have med tech specific programs.
Okay.
Or digital health. Or maybe you're more general and you want to come to our conference. We have a big capital conference on November 1st and November 2nd right at the Sheraton downtown.
Okay.
So all of that information is on our website. That's one way to connect. You could also become a member of PACT. And I mentioned that really our focus is on the entrepreneur.
Yes.
And so we make our organization and our events really accessible to entrepreneurs. We don't charge entrepreneurs very much money at all to become a member or to engage at our events. So we really view our role as providing those services, again, around capital, customers, and coaching to the entrepreneur, and that's our mission.
Okay. Well, listen, in addition to what you do here as the president CEO of PACT, you also manage funds.
I do.
And so putting that hat on, could you tell me what is it that you look for? What is it? How do you vet out who to invest in and who not to invest in?
Absolutely. So there's a number of different elements that you look at when making an investment. Most experienced entrepreneurs will tell you that it all comes down to the people. So really the key success factor to being a successful investor, particularly in early stage companies, is vetting the management and determining whether they're capable of growing a large enterprise. And that's kind of hard to do because you don't always know at the earliest of stages that someone's going to mature into that individual that has that level of capability. But that's the single most important success factor. Other things that certainly matter, market, right? You want to make sure you're going after a big market opportunity, that you have some level of proprietary technology or know-how, that is going into the product or service that you're providing. Things like that. Those are some of the important elements, but it always comes back to management. It's key.
If you kind of look at how you divide your time, the different hats that you wear, they seem to fit within kind of one general space, one genre, one ballpark. Do you think that's true, or do you find that they're really quite different things?
No, absolutely. It's all part of one ecosystem, if you will. It's the venture capital and technology ecosystem in this region, and that's how I got involved. I was a longtime venture and have been a longtime venture capitalist in this region, and I was chairman of an organization and ultimately led that organization to merge with another one and create PACT. So PACT, again, is my full-time endeavor, focus, and passion, and then I make time on the side certainly to do investments, as you pointed out.
I interpret that to mean that you're making enough money onto other things that you can spend time. That's how I look at it. It comes at, well, listen.
Don't let the word capital fool you, David. It's a nonprofit.
Well, okay, you still haven't convinced me. But anyway, I only say that jokingly because, listen, really, this is an area beyond my real knowledge. And so that's what's great for me to have someone like you on and Chris Wink who really can break this down for our audience. So I'm tongue-in-cheek, but I'm also trying to bring out for our listeners, what does this mean for them? And we went through kind of like how it helps our economy, how sometimes people feel a little distant when they hear, technology, healthcare, innovation. Oh, that's not for me. But you're showing how it is for them.
Yeah. I think historically, and if anybody is watching popular media, they're hearing about some issues around sexual harassment issues in Silicon Valley and some large organizations like Uber, and then venture capital firms. The technology community in general, I think over years has been recognized as not the most inclusive.
Right. Okay.
That's changing.
Yes.
And I would tell you that it's changing in greater ways here in the greater Philadelphia region than it is in other parts of the country and maybe even the world. And I think it's changed because there's a lot of passionate people. So I know you've got a number of veterans that listen.
Yes.
There's an initiative locally called Bunker Labs, which is really helping local veterans form businesses and putting them together in great cohorts to help them. I know you've got a big section of your listener base is the creative economy.
Right.
And the creative economy is being drawn into the technology community from a design perspective. Because the technology community is realizing that really interesting software is only really useful with great design that allows, from a product perspective, a customer to ultimately use that more effectively and efficiently. So you see an overlap from different communities that are being really engaged in the technology community, and I think that's a real positive. And we see that from a gender perspective, from a race perspective, et cetera, as well.
Yeah, I will also say that for some of our more senior listeners that at least I've come across the idea of smart cities, smart aging. Really by meeting some folks from the city of Seoul in Korea who were meeting with Drexel University people as well as Watson Computer, IBM, all around how smart technology would provide a better quality of life for people as they age, but primarily address the issue of the cost of healthcare.
It is by far the biggest area of investment in this region. So if you're an older American sitting at home listening, have a lot of confidence that Philadelphia is going to be a major player in that, and hopefully provide a number of different medical innovations. In fact, just this morning I was talking to two different entrepreneurs that are doing that.
Okay.
One that's providing a smart medication management system
Yes.
that allows older Americans who typically are taking 5+ medications a day to better manage and remember to take those. And that's a critical element for anyone's health, but in particular aging Americans with multiple medications.
Yeah, well, that's great. Listen, I mean, if you are an older American, what does this mean for you? Well, a better quality of life. I mean, an ability to press a button, have let's say, a wheelchair accessible vehicle come to your doorstep, take you where you want to go, take the funds right out of the out of your phone, your app, and to have a less intrusive life with a longer life and a better health care, those type of things. We could do it. We can do it. Other countries are doing it. The question is, do we have the will to do it? But thanks to organizations like the Philadelphia Alliance for Capital and Technologies, we're developing that right here, where we also have this great base of our universities, medical centers, and other things, pharmaceutical companies. And so putting all those things together, it's really meaningful for us. And I'm going to ask you to stay tuned, because we're going to take a commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to talk to another gentleman, Chris Wink, who is a publisher as well as an innovator. And then after that, we're going to have a conversation, all three of us. So stay tuned. Right, and we are back. You are listening to In the Know with David O on WWDB 860 AM. It's my pleasure to bring you these outstanding guests. I do my best, believe me, to bring really interesting people who have just a wealth of knowledge and experience to give it to you, not through me, but from them. My next guest is another such person. His name is Chris Wink. Like, you wink at someone? Yeah, Christopher Wink. Have you heard of Philly Tech Week? If you haven't, it's a fantastic event. And it really started through a entity called Technically Philly, which is something co-founded by Chris Wink. He is the publisher, and they expand into other areas, like they have a Baltimore Tech Week, and they also manage an entity called Generosity, with a C, not an S, Generosity. A generous city. He is a national leader in the new media, niche journalism, and innovation ecosystems, and he is right here in Philadelphia. Let's welcome Chris Wink. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited about it. Yeah, I appreciate the introduction.
Well, let's start with this. I mean, it's interesting because I have Dean Miller here, who was just speaking. And, he's an innovation guy, and he's an investor guy, and he brings communities together. And you kind of do the same thing. You're a publisher guy, a media guy, journalist guy, but you don't just report on the news, you almost make the news, in the sense that you bring communities together, and you have created some different vehicles as well.
Yeah, I think you're speaking to what we at Technically Media, we publish both Technically and Generosity. We've always felt we had a responsibility. If in this area you're going to report on the community, you better be bringing them together and challenging them to do the best version of what they are. So we think a lot of what we do is just what any newsroom should be trying to do. So we're a news organization, and for me it's very natural that you would see out of a newsroom important work. So whether it be something like Philly Tech Week or other events we do, from jobs fairs to general networking relationship events, through to actually helping the companies who report on, meet a lot of the people we profile. It's ultimately making our community better and more connected. That's certainly what we think news has always done.
Is that a new model, though? Because now we're into an area that I don't know, but I kind of recall hearing, like, you report the news, you aren't the news. Like if a polar bear is being eaten
Right.
by something, you just kind of record it. But what you're actually doing is reporting the news, providing information, and then kind of encouraging people to take positive steps to achieve something.
Yeah, and you're walking right into a step away. I mean, honestly, I guess it is the definition of innovation, new approaches to old challenges. Thus, one of the industries I dabble in, news, media, and the like, the relationship to journalism is in a generations-old challenge. And you're right that for most of the 20th century, the relationship was journalists only as referee. That you should not be known in a community. You should be distanced. That for me was something that never really made sense to me. We are better sourced, we are more accurate, we know what's happening because we're in it, and I don't think we are unable to view accurately our community. We've always had in news, you have your beat reporter, someone who's meant to be very close to the story, and you have your more general interest or feature writer who's meant to look at it from a farther distance. That's still true, but you're hitting on a real point that we said long ago that we were going to be involved. Pretty early on, we changed our tagline to "Better Cities Through Technology." That doesn't sound like a news organization. It sounds like maybe a nonprofit, maybe an advocacy group. But for us, it was just, if your news organization, community newspaper, trade journal, if it doesn't have a bias toward making the community it reports better, I think it's derelict in its responsibilities. And that's a pretty aggressive approach that we've taken to our role in this community.
Right. Now let me ask you this, because I see that you graduated Temple University in 2008, right smack at the recession, and no jobs and things were falling apart. And so you kind of enter into this journalism, publishing, being engaged at a time where perhaps there was also a need for an entity like Technically Philly, and just a vacuum that needed to be filled, especially for a lot of the young folks, innovative folks who were basically either staying in Philadelphia or moving to the city.
Yeah, I think there's something interesting about today's show's theme around innovation. I think too often that creates distance between people who hear about it, that we forget all that has ever meant was trying to approach something, approaching a challenge in a new way. So our story, my co-founder and I starting Technically is from that same vein. We were undergrads, we were active in the college newspaper, we were on a very traditional pathway of ending up working at a Metro Daily newspaper. That was in 2006, my clearest pathway was being in a Metro Daily newspaper, maybe covering politics. That would have been a very normal pathway. After undergrad, I was in Harrisburg covering state government, shared by a few newspapers, a prestigious fellowship that traditionally I would go from there and be on the arc toward being the kind of national political reporter that I might want to be. It was very clear in that era, in late 2008, to my co-founder and I, that pathway was being challenged, if not entirely disrupted. And we already were in and cared for a large metro market, Philadelphia. We loved this place. And it seemed unwise to venture the very traditional pathway when that's changing. So we watched we're in a generation's decline in new business incorporation, but we saw that uptick in the recession where a lot of people, ourselves included, that frankly didn't have a lot of options. Fear was our initial motivator to start something, and we wanted to report on a community that mattered. And what we found, as you alluded to, was this was a community that was fledgling in the city but had long roots in the broad region and needed another way to see itself. And I think that news media plays a really important role to be that reflecting pond. News has always been that mirror that a community, whether it likes it or not, it's how you see how the rest of the community sees itself. And we thought it was the right time for someone to be in there challenging that community, be in there just narrating that community, and that's exactly what we've grown into in response to what we saw was necessary.
Wow, that's interesting. I reflect back on kind of when I was in law school. This was back in like 1984, 85. What happened in those days is you got hired a year before you graduated. So if you're listening out there, yes, it's true. What happened is before you graduated, you had a job. You knew where you were going. You were done. They were interviewing you at the beginning of your third year of law school, because law school is 3 years. And before you graduated, before you began your second semester, many times you already had a job, everything done. And the idea of kind of going the route of the law firm was really going to a big firm because that represented stability, money, and opportunity. But when you're talking about 2008, 2009, 2010, people were losing their jobs. Companies were going under. Those pillars of American economy were not only shaken, they were basically discredited. And so many bright young people, it seemed, just weren't going the route that, let's say, my generation were going. They were saying, hey, listen, I got a master's degree, I'm opening a fusion food truck, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And so, it does seem to me different. Is that kind of something that you see, or is that just like from my perspective?
Well, I think it's real. There's a few threads that I think are worth pulling out there. One, I remember I sent, applicant packets to newspapers in Birmingham, Alabama, and Nashville, Tennessee, and Atlanta, and Chicago, and in Philadelphia. And in that era, those either fellowships or onboarding programs for young reporters were just completely being disbanded, or at least put on pause. Many of them have come back, a decade later as we've stabilized some and we saw a lot of cuts in newsrooms. So one, it was the recession generally. Two, it was my sector specifically, right, that we knew print journalism built on an advertising model that was in about a 40-year decline. We saw that changing even more rapidly. So that was my individual sector story. But you're hitting on something that's interesting too, which is how it related to so many other corners of the community that we can probably get to in our conversation portion, because I think it's worth remembering it's a number that I care a lot about. We forget that if you look toward the 70s until today, we are incorporating fewer businesses. We are not at an apex in entrepreneurship. We are aggressively talking and celebrating about its importance because we need that economic dynamism, but it's not going the right way. It's so important that we are in a generation's decline in the amount of economic dynamism. We did see an uptick around the recession, which is exactly what you're seeing, where we saw a lot of people, myself included, that would have been in very traditional pathways and got thrown off the journey and found a new one, and that's blossoming. But we are not celebrating entrepreneurship because it's at a height. We are celebrating because we need it so badly to bring back a level of dynamism that we want to see, and the hope is that maybe we can get people excited about it enough that they'll join in. But that for me is still an uncertain story.
Right. Now, in your role, not only as the co-founder and publisher of Technically, what is it that you're hoping to do when you talk about the fact that we need to really encourage entrepreneurism, innovation, and things like that? Why so for you personally?
I mean, we know if whether you care about access stories of economic opportunity for more people, we know it has to come from growth companies. That is what will solve it. Sole proprietorships are a fine band-aid, but we need all kinds of companies to grow and bring on employees. I think one of the, to sound the most capitalistic as I'll ever sound, the great patriotic duty you can do is hiring someone else and giving them, challenging them to do good and productive work, but to grow something around them. That is an important and vital necessity that we know we're confronting. So there for me is a social justice component to growing companies, and I'm interested in technology for all of the same reasons that economic development analysts are, that it has a real opportunity for high scale. We're probably in a very narrow window that a whole slew of people can access skills with relatively low lifts to get into high growth corners of the economy. I don't think that's going to last forever, frankly. So I do think some of it's opportunistic now for a question of social justice impact, but the reality is this is the battlegrounds for what our future looks like. This is exactly where it's happening, and so much of the rest of our world is looking to this nervously, this community and conversation around technology innovation for what our national or global economy will look like, but also a lot of local mixes. We know we've lost 400,000 jobs since the 1950s in Philadelphia from an array of industries, and it's not coming back in in retail alone, and we want to know what can fill those holes.
Now, with all these big buildings coming up, Comcast Innovation Center, University of Penn, Drexel, the Science Center, all that square footage being occupied supposedly, hopefully, I expect, by a lot of smart folks earning a living. Isn't that like a sign of really just a growth of jobs and opportunities in Philadelphia?
Yes, you can't see any ecosystem without an array of institutions and corporate partners that end up being either customers or partners or growth opportunities for your next generation of company. I think we always want to talk about what's that pipeline look like for the future. It takes a really long time. Comcast is a more than a half a century old story. So who's on that trajectory now, I think, is a journey we need to care a lot about. Yeah, that's incredibly important for creating anchors in our neighborhoods. I think we talk, as any city must, we talk about how do more of our residents benefit from those successes. We also care about whether those people are going to be city residents and contribute in other ways. We can't not talk about what our schools look like. We want people to be able to, I don't want to have to convince people that Philadelphia is a great place to live. I want it to be a natural obvious that the opportunity to have a great job is alongside a place where you can grow and raise a family. Those are strengths that end up rattling and ratcheting all around into every issue you've probably ever talked about.
Yes.
But you can stay
Yes.
focused and say, yes, of course, economic development matters. Those are opportunities for new growth of companies, but we need to challenge ourselves and say, who's on the pathway for the next big growth opportunities?
Chris, for our listeners right now, how can they stay in touch with you and get involved in all that you're talking about?
Yeah, so we are a free daily news site. If you are somewhat curious about what a tech community looks like in any of the 5 cities we publish in, Philadelphia being one of them, you can go to Technically. It's technical.ly. If that URL confuses you, you can just go to tphilly.com. That is my shorthand for folks who don't follow the .ly domain thing. But
Yes.
we're technically, it's not a .com, but yeah, go to tphilly.com. Keep it simple, and you'll land on the Philly portion of our site. We publish in 5 other communities, but in the top right, you can sign up for an email newsletter that another 12 to 15,000 Philadelphians get every day, and it's big headlines of what every single day, what's the news of this economy. Those are places to start and go and learn. We're active on social media channels if you're on Facebook or Twitter, but that's a good place to start.
Okay, and that would not only get you the newsletter, the publication, but also all the events and other things that you're engaged with, right?
Yeah, you've hit on it that we ourselves organize lots of events. At the end of April, we host Philly Tech Week, as you said. That is an opportunity for anyone to get involved. But because we're a news resource, we share. If PACT is having an event, we want to be ones to help share it. We share an array of events from dozens of important community partners. So we're both sharing others' events and our own. And so yeah, that email newsletter or checking that site every day or so, Technically Philly, you can Google it also. That will help you understand what this portion of the economy looks like.
All right, perfect. Well, listen, everybody, stay tuned because after this commercial break, we'll be back and then we'll talk to both Dean Miller and Chris Wink about technology in our area. Okay, this is David Oh. Thank you for joining me. Listen, I just want to alert you to a couple of things coming up. Are you a filmmaker? Well, maybe you're not, but maybe you know someone who is or they want to be. This September 28th, Thursday, at Community College of Philadelphia, 17th and Spring Garden, between 6 and 8, I'll be presenting a free, open to the public, expert presentation on how to finance, produce, and distribute your film. Well, I won't be the one talking, but it'll be Alex Murphy. He is just one of the top attorneys in our area who is involved with financing films. And he knows the ins and outs from major motion pictures to documentaries to local film projects, or what he calls indigenous films. And he'll be supplemented by a couple other folks, Devin Hampton, who's a filmmaker here in Philadelphia, and one of our adjunct professors over at Temple. Her name is Gabriella Watson, and she also is a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker, international documentary filmmaker, and it's all about how you get the money, how you produce the film, what it takes to make sure that if your model is to make the film first and sell it, that you've got all your paperwork in order, because if it's not in order, you're not going to sell that film, and how to get it distributed. And then let me say that on October the 6th, I hope you join me for a fundraiser for our nation's U.S. Army Green Berets. The Green Beret Foundation is a wonderful organization, and you know, they provide for those elite troops that put their lives at risk on behalf of our national safety. So that's going to be October the 6th at the Saigon Maxim Restaurant, right at 6th and Washington Avenue. Tickets are $65 per person. They're $500 for a table of 10. We don't raise that much money that way, so we're going to have auction item raffles. It's going to be fun, and we'll be joined by former Governor and former Mayor Ed Rendell, as well as Speaker of the House Mike Turzai, and the 32nd Undersecretary of the Army, former Congressman Pat Murphy, among others. So it'll be a fun event. I hope you'll join me. We'll have great speakers. It'll be a lot of fun, and all for a good cause. This money will go to support the children and dependents of our Green Berets. You know, they put their lives to risk, and we will help put their minds at ease, because they worry about their kids, of course, and they worry about their dependents. So please keep that in mind. Right now, we're going to get back to our guest, Dean Miller, President and CEO of the Philadelphia Alliance for Capital and Technologies, and Chris Wink, co-founder and publisher of Technically Philly Tech Week, and a bunch of other things. We've been talking with them, and so now we'll kind of like let them talk with each other, because they know more about this topic than I do. So let me ask you this, Chris. You've interviewed, I think, or at least your publication has interviewed Dean Miller before, right?
No, it's true. Yeah.
And so you kind of guys know each other. You're in the same space. What would you say is the big thing happening, the big trend, the next thing we got to keep our eye on for Philadelphia technology and innovation?
One story that we see across the country that tech communities are jostling with is what is one's reputation on a national stage, and it's usually under the guise of attracting and retaining the best and the brightest. And I have a complicated relationship with it, but one thing that I'll say that I see certainly happening in Philadelphia that is echoed elsewhere is that great hunt for the next iconic company. You in the last segment, you asked about Comcast, and it's so easy to take for granted the idea that you have, a Fortune 50 company building a second skyscraper in Center City and creating a lot of throw-off impact. It's easy to forget that that didn't come out of nowhere, and it was a company that grew over time through major acquisitions and some audacity that is unlike a lot of other Philadelphia business practices. So I think one big thing that I hear and see in Philadelphia is, excitingly, a lot of another generation of founders who now say to us, pay attention because we want to be the ones to build that next billion-dollar company in Philadelphia. And we hear that a lot, right. But I think it's a good kind of challenge for someone to take on. That's one thing that I see.
Dean, what do you say?
Let me first just congratulate Chris and his crew, because they really do a terrific job on reporting on the technology.
I should have sent that to you now.
Oh, look at it.
No, seriously, I will say, they are, there are a lot of negative angle to media. This show is certainly not one of them, and technically is not one of them. They take a very positive approach, or a champion, without really sacrificing the journalistic integrity. I mean, they do an exquisite job of reporting on and recognizing key figures. From my perspective, we talk a lot about healthcare.
Yes.
And I don't think that's going away. There's a lot of big problems to solve. There are a lot of smart people in this region, from healthcare providers to insurers, also called payers, to medical technology professionals, pharmaceutical companies, there is a tremendous amount of talent. And I mentioned before in my comments the number of universities and colleges that we have in this region, and that's unique in this country.
Yes.
And they're spitting out not just next generation technology developers, but scientists as well. And so I still think that there are many chapters to write on the healthcare transformation, and that Philadelphia can really, and already is in many ways, in the middle of it. Yeah, it's a challenging area. There are, it is one of those with very large macro forces. When we talk about what the federal government does, whether it's ACA or other things, but it is one that is born locally in terms of docs providing good quality care to patients and how they do that even better. And as you mentioned, for those older folks, as all of us, to create better, healthier lives. And so, that to me is still not the only, but one of the big stories for Philadelphia. And perhaps it's one that can mesh with Chris's point, where you have $1 billion plus company in the healthcare space. And we have a few that are definitely in the race.
That need to balance between when it's national and when it's local is, I think, really profound for me. Obviously, as a local news organization, we talk a lot about why you would ever approach a technology conversation from a local setting. That there are lots of people who understandably think that's somewhat foolish, that it's topical and that's it. I don't care where you are or what you're doing. I only care about what ends up being one of the few biggest, best companies or sector or competitors in a sector. One of the reasons that I think a lot of us do focus on a local angle is that ecosystem metaphor that Dean alluded to earlier, that is a popular and an effective one to convey how any business community or economic development community looks like, but certainly a narrower one like tech does it too, in which you watch talent, literal software engineers or leadership talent, moving between companies and bringing their expertise related across them. We want people to go in from have corporate jobs and startup jobs and mid-sized jobs, because there's different skill sets at different organizations. You want outside capital to be able to finance short-term growth to be more competitive, and you ultimately also want density of ideas, similar companies near to each other and competing with each other, but also nationally in one place. And I think that's something that resonates with me when I hear Dean and others talk about healthcare as a specialty. For me, that feels real. There's a reason you might want to say we can create that density, but I think it's important to remember that we have to compete on that national or global scale, because there are other regions that are saying the same thing, that Northern Virginia will talk about their access to DC and regulated industries, and that's where healthcare should happen. Or we'll see it around large health care systems in other markets. In Minneapolis, we'll want to talk about that. Nashville will want to talk about their digital IT focus. Denver will talk about personalized health. We're seeing different cities try to splice that up, and I think we want to keep challenging ourselves and saying it's not us versus city versus suburb. Is not one county versus another. It is a Philadelphia region against being strong against the whole world, entire world.
Well, definitely with the continued attractiveness of Philadelphia and our region for a lot of young folks, that looks like it's very positive. And so listen, I thank both of you for being on our show. For our listeners, if you want to listen to this again, or if you want to tell other folks about it, you can check us out on YouTube, In the Know with David O. You can also, hear a rebroadcast of this show or a recording of the show at www.wwda, whatever. Listen, WDB. Sorry about that. Everybody's laughing. WWDB 860 AM. We're at www.am.org. So tune in next week. We'll be back, and this time, I'll get all the call signals right. Hey, that's called keeping it real. All right, so join us next week, 2 o'clock, here on In the Know with David O.